Hey everyone, my name is Jamie Sullivan and this is my developmental psychology project. I researched the experiment, Does Identity Precede Intimacy? Testing Erikson's theory on romantic development in emerging adults of the 21st century. Erik Erikson was a German-American developmental psychologist and psychoanalyst. He focused on the role of the social world, society, and culture. He was born on June 15, 1902, and passed away on May 12, 1994. He is most famous for his psychosocial stages of development, which is what this experiment tested. Erikson was a developmental psychologist who established a theory of lifespan development. This theory consisted of individuals progressing through 8 psychosocial stages that each have their own crisis or conflict that must be resolved before one can successfully move on to the next stage. As you can see, the stages include trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair. In this study, we will be focusing on adolescent identity versus role confusion and early adulthood intimacy versus isolation. For adolescents, they should discover what is unique about them and what roles they can contribute to society. If adolescents fail to accomplish this, they may have trouble identifying their appropriate roles in life. In early adulthood, young adults are supposed to form intimate and long-term relationships with romantic partners. Negative outcomes result in loneliness, isolation, and fear of relationships. Erikson has stated that adolescents who fail to form their identity have trouble maintaining long-lasting romantic relationships. This is because adolescents should enter early adulthood with a firm sense of self in order to form these mature relationships. Also, this is because Erikson's psychosocial theory is in a fixed order where identity precedes intimacy, and according to him, one can't successfully complete the next task without completing the last one. The research hypothesis that the authors were interested in investigating in this experiment was Erikson's hypothesis of developmental ordering of identity and intimacy. Because many tasks in adolescence now stretch into emerging adulthood, it is crucial to investigate if Erikson's theory of developmental ordering of identity and intimacy is still valid. The authors wanted to see if Erikson was right, or if these identity and intimacy tasks now overlap and correlate with one another as a result of more emerging adults entering college. The authors also wanted to see whether identity precedes intimacy or whether intimacy precedes identity. If Erikson's theory is supported, the results would show identity being established in adolescence and intimacy being developed in early adulthood. The researchers tested this hypothesis using a 10-year longitudinal study in Germany. There were 93 participants in total, specifically 52 females and 41 males. Most of the participants originated from intact families and came from a broad socioeconomic strata. Also, the percentage of participants having a romantic partner increased continuously throughout the study because at age 15, 32% had a romantic partner, and at age 25, 62% had a romantic partner. 5 of the participants were married, and 4 of them were parents by the age of 25. In addition, half of the participants were pursuing a career, and the other half were in college. The only materials needed in this experiment were the participants, the Washington University Sentence Completion Test, the German version of the Network of Relationship Inventory, the Olofsky interview, and Marcia's identity status interview. This experiment was a 10-year-long longitudinal study with 8 waves. The researchers in the study assessed the development of identity and intimacy in adolescence, specifically at age 15, and in emerging adulthood, specifically at age 25. There were 8 waves of the study, and the adolescence's results were drawn from wave 2, where the mean age was 15.3 years old. For emerging adults, they used wave 7, where the mean age was 24.1, and they also used wave 8, where the mean age was 25.3. They measured and compared ego development, intimacy, and identity achievement at these varying waves. To measure ego development, the researchers gave the Washington University Sentence Completion Test at Wave 2 and Wave 7 of the experiment. They gave the adolescent version to the 15-year-olds in Wave 2, and then, a decade later, gave them the adult version during Wave 7 when they were 24 years old. They also used gender-specific versions for males and females in the study. The researchers had the participants complete 36 incomplete sentences. An example of these are, "When I am criticized blank," or "my mother blank." Responses to this test were rated by 2 raters who used the High and Lovinger manual to rank the ego development. The options were infancy, impulsive stage, self-protective stage, conformistic stage, self-aware stage, conscientious stage, individualistic stage, autonomous stage, and integrated stage. To measure intimacy or the quality of relationships with romantic partners at Wave 2, the 15-year-olds were given the German version of the Network of Relationship Inventory. The NRI contains scales on companionship, conflict, instrumental aid, satisfaction, intimacy, nurturance, affection, punishment, admiration, relative power, and reliable alliance. While intimacy in adolescence were measured with the Network of Relationship Inventory, intimacy in adult partnerships were measured using the semi-structured interview designed by Olofsky and Rhodes. The researchers used Wave 8, so when the participants were about 25 years old, they were rated on commitment, communication, emotionality, knowledge of the traits of their partner, perspective coordination, conflict resolution, autonomy, acceptance of autonomy of the partner, and detachment. Identity achievement was measured using Marcia's identity status interview. The questions in this interview related to career, relationships, and view of the world. They asked these questions during Wave 7, so this was when the participants were about 24 years old. So basically, overall, at 15 years old, the participants took the Network of Relationship Inventory to assess their perceptions of intimacy. When they were 15 and 24, they took the Washington University Sentence Completion Test to measure their ego development. Also, when the participants were 24, they participated in the Marcia interview to identify identity status. Lastly, at 25, their intimacy was assessed with the Orfsky Intimacy Status Interview. The data was given to randomized trained experts for scoring, and previous results weren't known to the scorers. The results show that there is a strong increase in ego development from age 15 to 24. Also, ego development at age 15 was negatively related to intimacy at that age, but positively related to ego development and identity achievement at 24 and to intimacy at 25. The results also showed that global identity didn't mediate the path from ego development in middle adolescence to intimacy in emerging adults, but relational identity did. There was also a clear correlation with males showing lower levels of ego but higher levels of intimacy at 15, but lower levels of intimacy at 25. Males were also less likely to have a partner at 25. Also, partnership was related to higher levels of intimacy at both 15 and 25 years of age. Lastly, family status and socioeconomic status wasn't related to these variables. Overall, the findings of the study were consistent with Erikson's hypothesis of a developmental ordering of identity and intimacy. The hypothesis was supported because there was a strong developmental progression in both identity and intimacy from ages 15 to 24. Also, the WUSCT scores were higher at 24 than they were at 15. And intimacy with a partner was strongly predicted by ego development during adolescence at age 25. The results of the study are extremely consistent with Erikson's theory because it proved that identity development does in fact precede intimacy. The multiple methods used for collecting data surrounding intimacy and identity allowed for this rigorous test of Erikson's theory. Some of the limitations include that the sample was too small to be generalized to the entire population, so replication is needed for larger studies. However, these findings were very similar to other research studies on ego development, identity status, and intimacy status. Also, different tests were used to assess intimacy when the participants were 15 versus 25 years old, which isn't ideal. In addition, the small sample wouldn't allow for the testing of gender differences, which is often debated in Erikson's theory. Studies have also shown that ethnicity plays a role in psychosocial development, so future studies should incorporate ethnicity-diverse samples. The researchers showed that Erikson's hypothesis was also valid for adolescents and emerging adults in the 21st century. The study added to the understanding of diversity in the transition to adulthood. The researchers' findings have huge implications for the theory of emerging adulthood, since the results suggest that a commitment to an identity and partnership occur after a period of exploration, even though this period is longer than it was during Erikson's time.